Norwegian Cruise Line has been under some serious scrutiny lately due to some of the choices that they've been making. So it's nice to see some good news from the line this week, but is it enough to counter all the bad press? You're going to want to stick around to the end to make sure you don't have your cruise canceled for a very relatable reason. Ahoy travelers, it's Amy with Cruising from the Ozarks, here with your weekly Cruise News Roundup and my thoughts on some of the biggest stories of the week. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It only takes a second, and doing so helps cruisers like you find us. Our last cruise was our first back since the shutdown, and we were looking forward to finally being done with in-person muster drills. Unfortunately, we were sailing on Norwegian, and they had just gone back to the in-person musters shortly before we sailed. And while it wasn't the worst muster drill I've had to endure, at least it was indoors and we got there early enough to have a seat. It took way too long. And the staff kept telling everyone to be quiet and get off their phones, even though we're just waiting for the drill to start. I understand making sure that everyone's quiet and paying attention during the actual muster drill, but forcing everyone to wait in silence with nothing to do for 30 minutes or more prior to instructions even beginning was not okay. And I think Norwegian must have heard about this because they came out this week and announced that they're going to go back to the e-muster drills. So starting in April. Norwegian hasn't given a reason for this, but I think we all know they received way too much blowback from cruisers. I know I saw many people saying that they would be more likely to choose a line with an e-muster process. And then you have Carnival and Royal that came out saying that they had no intention of going back to an in-person. So my guess is the pressure was really on for Norwegian. After their statements on needing to go back to in-person for the safety reasons, I know they had to have been getting a lot of complaints for them to reverse course on this, and in such a short time. My question to you, would having to sit through an in-person muster drill be part of your decision process when choosing a cruise? So yay, Norwegian goes back to the best thing to come out of COVID, but then there is the story that came out about the woman who had her entire cruise canceled by NCL due to something every one of us has done at some point. Now, before I get to that story and more, if you've made it this far into the video, why aren't you subscribed yet? Most of our viewers aren't subscribed to the channel, and hitting that button really does help out with the YouTube algorithm. We're a new channel and could really use your support to help us reach more cruisers like you. Like, subscribe, and comment. Make sure you also ring that notification bell so that you don't miss any future posts. I know that you're going to want to hear about the woman who had her almost $5,000 cruise canceled without a refund, but before we get to that, let's give Norwegian some credit for another positive announcement this week. If you've been following the channel for a while, you're going to know that I'm not a fan of most shipboard entertainment. While I enjoy some of the game shows, you're unlikely to find me in the comedy club or in the theater to watch a variety show. However, if there's a Broadway show being performed, I'm much more likely to be standing in line to get a seat in that theater. We did so when it came to our Norwegian cruise because I wanted to see Six, the musical. Now that's why I was excited when this week I saw that Norwegian's newest ship, the Viva, is going to have the Tony Award nominated musical Beetlejuice headlining in its 3-story multi-purpose Viva Theater and Club, which includes immersive special effects and cutting-edge lighting and audio. So that actually some good news. I'd love to see Beetlejuice the musical. I love the movie. Why wouldn't I love the musical? Is that going to be enough to entice you onto the Viva? I'd love to see this musical, but I still think Norwegian is walking a fine line when it comes to some of the decisions they've been making to save a buck, or should I say, make a buck. I don't know if I'll ever sail on the Viva, but if I do, I doubt they're going to still be putting on Beetlejuice. What about you? Are you planning on sailing on the Viva? You got it booked already? And if not, does this announcement entice you to consider it? While Norwegian has managed some good press this week with their announcement of returning to the e-muster, yay, and a new musical. The story that I found the most interesting and disturbing is of a woman, let's call her Mrs. K, who had her fully paid for cruise canceled by Norwegian due to something almost every one of us have done before. Now, this is actually a very long story, but I'm going to try to summarize it while still hitting all the important parts. Stick around to the end because this is a roller coaster ride of a story. In an article about this entire fiasco, Mrs. K said, quote, "I was looking at shore excursions and other things that we could do on our vacation. Suddenly a pop-up on the screen said we could book ground transfers from Orlando for around $100. That sounded like a good idea, but I wanted to look at my options more closely, but I got distracted by something and put my phone down. An hour later, I received 3 emails from Norwegian Cruise Line confirming our cruise was canceled. I was shocked and I had no idea what was going on," end quote. Apparently, Norwegian canceled her cruise because she put an add-on into the online cart. Now, Mrs. K claims that she didn't even put this into the cart, but she was just looking at the pop-up. However, NCL is claiming that that act constituted her adding this transfer, then not paying for it immediately, which that close to the cruise date constituted default of payment. No amount of begging and pleading with Norwegian would change the fact that they had canceled her cruise and were not going to give her her money back. What in the world? I have never heard of an online company claiming that putting something into your cart is the same thing as actually purchasing that item. You don't get on Amazon and load it up with a bunch of things and then come back an hour later to a confirmation email that you purchased those items. I've got stuff sitting in my Amazon cart that's been in there for 2 weeks because I haven't decided if I want to buy them yet. And I've got 2 and 3 of the same things because I haven't decided which one I want to buy. This is disturbing, but it gets worse. When Mrs. K realized that she was getting nowhere with Norwegian's customer service, she went to an outside company that works to resolve issues like this. It was called Consumer Rescue. During their investigation, it revealed that Mrs. K was unable to open any of the emails that NCL sent her, and they had deleted all records of the cruise from the app. So I'm guessing online as well. Mrs. K even contacted AOL. Side note, I didn't know AOL even existed anymore. And they said that NCL must have recalled the emails. You can do that? Anytime I've tried to do it, it didn't work. The email was still there. So in short, it appears that NCL had the emails they sent to Mrs. K recalled so the evidence is gone. Although Mrs. K could not open the cancellation notifications from NCL, the imprint of these emails were still visible. And I'm sure what as you go in, it shows that there was an email, but every time you try to click on it, it says this email's been recalled, this email's no longer available, something like that. And each of these emails had an attachment, which they're guessing was the contract, yet nothing is accessible to her to verify anything. What? This is so shady. What's going on? I mean, it almost seems unbelievable, but in the article, there is screenshots, proof of this. In an email to the Consumer Rescue, NCL said, quote, "Later on within the final payment window, Mrs. K added ground transfers to her reservation. As such, payments for those transfers were due at the time of reservation. As payment was not received at the time of booking, the reservation was canceled," end quote. This seems unbelievable, but it gets even more unbelievable. Not only did Mrs. K's entire cruise get canceled 3 weeks prior to sailing, she's still having to pay for the cruise. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, how can that be when the cruise was fully paid for? Well, she chose to use the loan service called Uplift that works with Norwegian to finance the cruise and spread out payments. So, while the cruise was paid for on Norwegian's end, she still has the majority of the cruise costs yet to pay to Uplift. So essentially, it would be like putting your cruise on a credit card and then having to pay that off after your cruise, but with a scheduled amount each month. Carnival does something different, and we use it, but with Carnivals, what they do is they just break your payments up to Carnival in equal amounts for however many months left prior to the final deposit being due. So this, you'd never pay for the cruise after you'd already sailed on the cruise. It's different. You have to still have final payment done 3 months prior to the sail date. So we do this with Carnival. If we book something 2 years out, then we can spread those payments out for a year, over a year and a half. Luckily, with all the negative press surrounding this story, not the least of which included popular channels like La Lita Loca and Don's Family Vacations spreading the word, Norwegian contacted Mrs. K yesterday and relented, sort of. While her cruise still sailed off without her and her family, Mrs. K is being given future cruise credit from Norwegian. Once I read through the whole article about this that was put out by Consumer Rescue, and I'll link that below so that you can read it yourself, I was really concerned that this could happen to you or me very easily. Who hasn't been excited for an upcoming cruise and looked at add-ons for the cruise? Mrs. K was looking for excursions and this pop-up box came up. And whether or not she actually put it in her cart or not still should not have meant that she was then saying, I have decided to purchase said item. Then there's this sketchy stuff with the emails. I have always just put all my cruise emails in a folder in my Gmail account. I have a folder called Cruise. I don't print them out, but I'm going to start capturing a screenshot of anything important and also saving it on a separate file on my hard drive. Now, luckily, my mom is old school and she prints out copies of all the emails that I forward to her. You shouldn't have to do that. But if companies are going to start recalling emails to get rid of evidence, now, for me, Norwegian is definitely not going to be my first choice of a line to sail on, at least not as long as stories like this are coming out. The good press is not outweighing the bad for me. What about you? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this. I am shooketh for sure. Why not stick around and watch this video, then come back next week for another one designed to help you have an amazing cruise. Have a blessed week, everyone.